Alrighty, welcome to Ratropolis, everybody. This is a card deck building wave-based base defense game. Well, that's a mouthful. Also, I've received some feedback, so this will be a post-commentated run instead of the live commentary. For the most part. So for this playthrough, I went for the male Shaman leader, and worth noting about all of these leaders is that they effectively have like a type, so shaman, scientist, general, etc. And that kind of defines which cards they have access to in general. And the male and female version is just kind of a slight variation with different starting decks, as well as a different leader ability, as well as a different starting advisor. Advisors are the passive buffs you can see in the top right, the money you can see in the top left, as well as the number of available reticents, as in the population space. Also, this is going to go pretty fast, and I didn't make a script just so I would actually be able to put out the video. I hope this is okay. So initially here, I just place the acolytes on the wall and keep playing Soulflower. Now, normally you have a little cooldown at the bottom right until you can redraw, but the redraw cost you can pay in order to just redraw instantly is very cheap at the beginning. And I play various cards, for example, cheese cards you can see, they are only worth playing if you have more than one in hand in order to make money. And I keep playing these cards over and over again just to make money. This is actually quite unique to the male shaman leader here, because most other leaders don't really have a way to make money early. But Soulflower in particular is a double-edged sword. It gives you a ton of money, but it puts a curse onto your minions. Now, curse is a shaman-specific ability. Also here, I think I'm gonna pick... What am I gonna pick? The house card. The houses allow me to have more population space. Right now we have a maximum population of 8 reticents for various reasons. And, well, thanks to the curse, we're gonna reduce that number occasionally. So, curse is an effect on a creature that activates approximately every 5 seconds. For however much curse they have, they take damage. So that's a strictly negative thing to be afflicted with a curse. In the shop here, that always happens after wave 1, I buy a defensive wall and a fire station. Defensive wall allows me to expand my territory to the left or the right, and the fire station allows me to rebuild stuff quicker if it gets destroyed. So effectively it just speeds up things. The grain card in the top left, you can see just kind of starting to work there. Just kind of gives you a tiny bit of money after a certain amount of time, but it also binds up your resources for like minion space, so it's very limited in how useful it is. Here also, I'm actually beginning to stop using Soulflower at this point soon. And as you can see, I just micromanage these little ranged guys from behind the wall. So these spitter enemies have the annoying tendency to just shoot slightly behind the defensive wall occasionally, and this means that the low HP ranged units often just kind of get hit. So the pottery card is the card that you will see me play usually first whenever I get it in hand. That one gives you more money the more other cards you have in hand. And this is also kind of where I stopped just spamming the redraw button, because every time a new wave arrives, redrawing costs more money, although arguably here I would have still made a good profit by just keep using Soulflower. Soulflower, as I said, it just puts a curse on your minions, and they just eventually die to the curse. Especially the lower HP range minions would be, well, strongly afflicted by it. And here, I get another event. Events basically happen occasionally, regularly, as well as, well, predictably after a lot of waves, but not all of them. Also, I just keep moving my minions between the various defensive walls, because, especially in higher difficulty, you don't have enough minions to work with. So, next up, I play way too fast, I'm sorry, this is difficult to go for. This advisor here gives me one extra option whenever I pick up a chest, which you get a chest every time you complete a wave. Also, you might notice that I put the minions at a defensive wall that is, well, behind the frontmost defensive wall. This is because I prefer them to not be right behind the wall, so they can't get sniped by the ranged enemies, as I mentioned before. So I just kind of have them slightly further away. At this point, pretty much all the acolytes have died to the curse. Their special ability is that they briefly revive as a skeleton, or whatever they are called them. And those can continuously fight, but they also spawn already with curse inherent. Plus, earlier I acquired a forbidden trade card. So the soul flower is fantastic to make money in the early game, but forbidden trade will kind of leverage that in the later stages when I can't just keep damaging my own minion because I need them to defend the base. And here I also got an event to remove a card, and I decided to remove the grain card because it ties up the population space for not that much gain. Even though it's cheap money in the early game, I don't necessarily need it in the early game. Then this blessing card here allows me to permanently reduce the cost of another card. Forbidden Trade is a soul-sucking card. I don't know what you want to call it. Actually, it has a Soul Siphon is the official name in the game. And Soul Siphon activates whenever you have the card in hand and any unit died. That includes enemies, that includes allies. So I just keep putting more ranged units behind the walls because the walls they have a lot of HP for the early stages of the game. So it allows me to survive. I also buy an ambush card here. The blue cards are skill cards and usually allow you to do various effects. I'm also strongly considering buying a Banshee here, which I basically have never really done before. Because the Banshees apply curse to enemies, which is technically kind of nice, but practically very difficult to use. But in conjunction with Purifying Plants here, which is like a little building that occupies one space, the Purifying Plants and applying curse to enemies actually is a very nice combination. Either way, Forbidden Trade, the Soul Siphon means that anytime a unit dies while this is in your hand, it just kind of attaches more souls to that card. And here I finally end up buying the Banshee. And this ends up being actually surprisingly useful, which I never really used the Banshee before. They attack up to 3 enemies at a time with their small area of effect and can be quite helpful. Also here the ambush that deals 50 damage, and let me tell you, targeting an enemy is actually kind of difficult in this game. It's probably one of the main pet peeves I have about it, as much as I like the game otherwise. Targeting specifics is awkward. So here I plant the flower, and then I send out the Banshee. So the Banshee is going to apply curses to enemies, specifically one curse. It doesn't deal much damage. In fact, the ghost doesn't deal any direct damage, it just applies the curse. However, the curse applied is good enough because that flower that I just planted deals 1 damage to any enemy, specifically enemies, not allies, that have any curse attached to them every second. And 1 damage a second is a lot of damage, especially in conjunction with the leader ability that we have. Also here, this was a boss wave, so we get a big special card. We can upgrade a card or we can expand the walls. In this case, I get the temple. The temple is a fairly large and expensive building to build, but it effectively increases the amount of souls gained for any unit dying by 1. Also worth noting, these cultists that die, they die once with their regular character, then they revive as skeletons, and then they die again as skeletons, so they actually are in fact by themselves worth at least 2 souls whenever I have a soul siphon card in hand. Also, as you can see here, the minions behind the wall are getting pelted by the enemies, and at this point I just hope that they die before my minions die. Next up, we have one of the more useful cards, especially in the early game here, the Watchtower. The Watchtower effectively just shoots enemies. That's it. Also, by the way, Forbidden Trade doesn't cost any money to play, so I might as well just play it whenever I have it, unless I plan on something else, which I think in this case I do. This event here, I pay 300 coins in order to upgrade the thing. So the temple gives +1 soul. However, when you upgrade any card, it basically becomes 50% better. Now, 50% more of 1 is, well, 1.5, but the game generously rounds up everything, so every time a unit dies now, we get 3 souls generated, which is actually quite massive, especially for cards I acquire later. Here, on this merchant, you always can buy a defensive wall in the second slot. Not sure why it's the second slot, but you can always buy a defensive wall, which is very nice. Also, I'm actually at this point not terribly worried about keeping track of both sides. As you can see, the left side is just being defended by this little tower. It's not going to actually be able to stem the tide, but I have my leader ability that removes a random ally unit and applies 1 curse to an enemy. And thanks to the flower that we planted earlier, these enemies are just going to continuously take damage. And that damage just adds up quite a bit, especially in the early waves. Because the enemies don't have that much HP, even though this is the highest difficulty. So next up, more houses. As you can see in the top left, it jumps from 20 population space once the house is built up to 23. So each house is worth 3, as well as tax. Tax is basically your regular income cycle from whenever the game advances one tax cycle, as it is called. And you just kind of regularly gain money, which can be quite helpful. I ambush one of these shooty guys just so they have less of a chance to kill my minions, and as you can see, once again I have them behind the previous wall. Now this requires quite a bit of micromanagement to just keep your early army alive, but it just kind of makes it a little bit nicer. On the left side at this point I just planted a bunch of cultists, and well, even though this is not a particularly big army on the left side and they're likely to suffer some casualties, it is easily enough in conjunction with the tower to just keep enemies at bay. And at wave 10, this is one of the big boss waves coming up. Here, I also get an executioner advisor. I also pay half of my current money for it, so yeah, it's pretty expensive. The executioner advisor allows me to, whenever I remove any ally with a skill card, those are the blue cards, myself, I get actually extra population space. And that is huge, because generating or having more space for placing more minions or occupying them otherwise is really difficult to do until you get specific cards, or in this case an advisor. I gain 2 population space whenever I offer one as a sacrifice. And the offering is basically just attaching extra damage. I think it's plus 5 damage to minions. I can even sacrifice one of my Skell Rats that eventually die anyways. And this still gives me the extra population space in the top left, as well as, well, giving plus 5 attack to all the minions that are currently on the specific wall and targeting. So effectively, that is a fantastic, like, early game, or even just kind of general game thing that you can get, because being able to expand population so you can place more minions relatively freely is a big deal. Because effectively, the more minions you have, the more of a critical mass you have in order to defeat enemies before your minions take too much damage. And here, I have the choice of some interesting cards. This Prey card here would upgrade another card randomly in my deck after a certain amount of time. However, this other advisor here on the right gives plus 1 attack and plus 8 HP to all my minions. And I figured, okay, this is pretty decent, especially in the early game, but I didn't realize on how powerful it would be. Because with the Executioner Advisor, I will be able to place more and more minions, and these ghosts deal normally 0 damage. However, because they now have plus 1 attack, they deal 1 damage, which isn't a whole lot even in the early game, but if you have a lot of ghosts, it adds up. Alrighty, here we now have the weasels attacking. We are on wave 11. This is where the waves upgrade, and welcome to the team, Moth Conjurer. This is the Moth Conjurer, and the Soul Reaper on top of it is going to be fantastic too for later. So the Moth Conjurer summons a little moth. Unfortunately, the little moth is going to die because it begins with curse, and I think it survives for like 10 seconds by default unless it gets hit by enemies. But what it does is amazing. It confuses enemies and they start attacking the nearest unit, including their allies. Here I briefly consider getting the Shamanic Tree, which is a building that gives plus 10 HP to your summoned units, but I don't think this is actually particularly great, to be honest, because sure, it makes the moths survive a little bit longer, but they will eventually die anyways. And here I will be able to upgrade a card. I immediately upgrade the Moth Conjurer, because this minion actually also deals some damage by itself, although the big deal about it is that it's going to summon moths to confuse enemies. And unironically, I think for the highest difficulty on the Shaman leader, this card is pretty much required in order to stem the tides of enemies. Also, once again, I remove a minion in order to get more maximum minion space, and here you can see a barrel flying behind one of my walls. So this is another big reason why I want to have an extra wall outside the wall I'm currently defending. I also reduced the cost of the Moth Conjurer, so I would still always be able to play it even if I have no money, because money is going to become more and more of a concern. Here I get a Smithy card. This is another lucky breakthrough, because being able to upgrade your cards on demand is amazing. And on top of that, I actually go for myself, unusual choice of getting the Slum card. Normally when you place a building, that card is spent and you can no longer place it. However, the Slum card will duplicate itself after you place it. And the thing about it is, it basically gives you extra population space. Not as much as a house. Actually, I think it's exactly as much as a house. Either way, you get less taxes, which means over time you earn less money. And effectively it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Sure, you get more minions, but because you have less and less taxes, you have less money over time, which does add up. However, I'm kind of hoping here that the Forbidden Trade will eventually be able to offset this. Also, real quick about the Soul Reaper I bought as well. Actually, no, let's get to the boss here. This boss is a big meanie, because he has cannons in the back that just kind of randomly attack your buildings. And I'm trying to ambush him or hit him with the ambush card. There it is, I managed to hit him. And effectively, the boss just randomly destroys buildings, including the ones that are getting repaired. This is why buying the early fire station to repair buildings quicker is very nice. Wait, the one Moth Conjurer and an Assassinate card. So this boss can be a pretty big nuisance, but thanks to the Moth Conjurer, that one guy we sent out, just destroying the entire wave by itself, well, it was not much of an issue. Either way, real quick, the Soul Reaper. Also upgrading the Forbidden Trade here to get more money in the long run. The Soul Reaper is a card that is Soul Siphon, which means it gains charges whenever any unit dies. And the more charges it has, once I place it, it will have additional attack damage. So, in order to be able to defeat the effectively final wave, this is literally me planning for the final wave here, I want to have at least one card that can nuke enemies or the bosses in some capacity. Because sure, dealing 3 damage to these enemies is largely sufficient, and them hitting each other is great, but bosses cannot be confused or status effect, so I kind of need to deal with them in some reasonable capacity, and a big damage dealer like the Soul Reaper that has like a few thousand stacks is going to fit that bill. Here also I'm considering as to what should I remove. And I decide to remove one of the ghosts. Also, these shield wearers or shell weasels, whatever you want to call them, they are pretty annoying because they just block all damage from like the projectiles that come from above, which happens to be most of my ranged force. Also here, that one little ghost is applying the curse, and as you can also see here, the weasels have the nasty tendency of pulling one of your ranged units from behind walls, or the back lines anyways, to the front. So they are kind of difficult to deal with reliably without losing too many units. This random event here made me get plus 2 extra seconds, minus 2 extra seconds until I get the next redraw. And I don't have the money to pay for the redraw for most of the game anyways, because that's so expensive at this point. So, might as well. And here, I lose all gold. So that event specifically happens after I expand my wall a third time to either side, left or right. In this case, I built a wall to the right, and that event always happens at that point. Once that event happens, basically you have the choice to have the enemies come in quicker, as in the seconds between the waves is shorter, which is really bad if they're already coming and I can barely keep up with them. And the other one is effectively where you spend all your money. But if I don't have much money, that's perfectly fine, and that's kind of exactly what I was hoping for. Here the smithing now allows me to upgrade a card for the first time, and I upgrade the Muff Conjurer. Now it will summon 2 Muffs. This is great. Also here once again trying to knock out shield bearers, and I actually tend to prefer keeping one wall just kind of broken down in the front. That way the jumpy barrels that normally jump behind your first wall are, well, basically just jumping in front of us as well. Also here you can see they just keep pulling in minions, and my minions are getting their attacks pelted into the shield, and it's not going well, to be honest. Like, I lost a lot of little minions here. I have a lot of population space, but I don't have the money or the resources to be able to place them. So here, once again, the blessing card, by the way, is specific to this area. I selected a random area to play in. You can have the forest, you can have the beach, and you can have the desert. The special cards... Also here I was really confused. What? Because this is another like mini boss wave, and the cannons are on the left. I was really confused about this because I didn't even know you could damage the cannons. And the boss, is on the right. Normally he gives the action to fire at your buildings and destroys them. And this was really confusing as to why they separate. I still have no idea. Also, I lost my thread as to what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. I also got a reinforced card. Reinforced cards allows me to discard other cards in my hand, and for each card discarded, I both heal the wall for 40 HP and increases maximum HP by 40. Which, by the way, incidentally also just kind of gives it 80 HP if it was lacking some HP. So this big weasel dude is about to be dead, and we are just about strong enough. In conjunction with being able to apply Curse to all enemies with the leader ability, this is just about working out. And here, I am struggling to keep everything alive. I also built the wall in the front again, just so the enemies pile up on it, and that barrel decided to just jump behind it because it can. And I have money troubles, so... The problem with money is that I don't have enough of it. This advisor here gives me 5 gold anytime I play any card for any card that is in the tomb. That is the bottom right, like 8 right now, you can see. And effectively right now, if I play any card, I gain 40 gold for playing any card. So effectively it's just kind of passive income. Especially with all the slums I built, I have no more passive income at all. So this could be an issue in the long run. But... the Moth Conjurer is going to effectively solve all of my problems by just having the enemies fight each other and just destroy each other. This is actually pretty great. I also keep building more slums, so I have more population space, but I can hardly keep up with the minions. And that is because my deck is too large, like the card deck. And effectively, you only draw 5 cards every time you redraw. And you can increase the amount you can redraw by having various buildings and other effects. However, that is kind of, well, expensive, and you need to randomly get these cards on top of it, so there's that. So here I get a market. I would say market is one of the most important buildings because, especially for the higher difficulties, you are trying to get specific cards in order to win. And here I'm still looking for one specific card, hoping that it will appear. And the market basically periodically allows me to get a selection of cards that I can buy from. And that is really, really helpful if I, well, can buy the right amount. The smithy allows me to once again upgrade a card, so I upgrade. I'm actually not sure here, I'm just experiencing this with you. Do you have a bigger AoE attack? No. Just apply 2 curse. Yes, but am I gonna upgrade? I recorded this yesterday, so good morning. Oh yeah, I upgrade the guard, so they get +2 attack power, which actually allows them to keep up reasonably well with all the enemies going around. I also reinforced that wall, so it has more maximum HP, and also is healed just a little bit. So this is where I really need the Moth Conjure, and he comes in just clutch. This is kind of what I mean with, I manage to get my cards just about in time sometimes, and my card deck is too large. I'm not guaranteed to redraw the correct cards that I need until, well, I might either get lucky or I need to redraw my entire deck. So I need to get rid of cards in order to guarantee that I have the Moth Conjure available, just so I will be able to, you know, get through. Also, these cheese cards, they are only really giving you any money if you play them with other cheese cards in conjunction. Like, they give you money, which is nice, but the problem is you need at least 2 cheese cards in hand. And the more cards you have in your deck, the, well, less likely it is that you have 2 in your hand at a time, or 3 for that matter. So the Moth Conjure is going to get played here. Once again, the Moth Conjures, by the way, they are units by themselves that deal damage, in this case 6 damage, which is pretty decent. However, they only hit 1 unit, and they are a frontline unit in front of the wall, so they get killed rather quickly. Egg, sure. Here also I place a Ghost at the front wall, hoping to curse the enemies, and then I realize, wait a second, I have my leader ability, so I could curse all enemies and just have them get periodically damaged, thanks to the flower we have planted. I also got an egg in the event early. This egg is normally not that useful because your population space is very limited, but thanks to the early Executioner Advisor, I have a lot of population space in conjunction with the slums. So I actually plant the egg, and after the egg is actually going to run its course, it turns into another egg. And then it turns into a very, very powerful minion, but it ties up like a large portion of your population space, but for once, I'm actually not shy or short on those anyways. So yeah, that's nice. So I probably should have rewatched this video beforehand so I could talk about certain points as to what is happening at certain parts. But hey. Oh yeah, by the way, whenever I place a defensive wall on this difficulty, it also reduces my population space by 1, so especially in the early game, having 1 less minion you can place is kind of a big deal. And here this is also wave 20, and because of the highest difficulty, bosses spawn with other bosses, so we get the double boss. There's like a variation and randomness as to which boss you normally get, but here we just get both. One of them is commanding cannons, so it is going to periodically destroy buildings, and that big guy just lands behind the first wall, kind of like all of the other barrel guys, which is honestly really dangerous, because I don't have a good way to deal with them. So here, I'm actually going to use the offering card for once, in order to increase the damage my minions are going to deal to things. The front wall is, well, fallen by now, and this is also where I feel like I have to play my Soul Reaper already in order to defeat the guy, but it gets basically instantly killed, so this was not a good timing. Which is the big difficulty about a minion that deals extra damage based on souls, rather than like a skill card that deals extra damage. And here, thankfully, I pulled all my army from the right side to the left in order to have them defend, but this is a big risk. Because this is wave 20. Sure, this is the big boss wave. Also more Purifying Plants for more passive damage when enemies get cursed. Oh, wait, no, I buy the Pray card, which allows me to periodically upgrade cards. Either way, my army from the right is helping here defeat the bosses. One is down, which is good. However, the enemies from the last wave are going to spawn very soon. And that is a huge problem, because they are strong. Wave 21 and upwards, if you don't have a solid way of dealing damage to enemies, They are monsters. Here we are able to just about deal with the bosses, which honestly wave 20 is one of the most difficult ones, because you need specific cards to be able to deal with them. The Triumph event always happens at wave 20, and we can hire an advisor, which is randomly useful, I guess, or plus 20 more minions. However, the downsides are quite severe, and here I actually don't specifically want the advisor that was chosen. I just wanted to have the less severe downside there, which happened to be either I lose half of my gold, which is not great, but okay, or I lose 3 seconds each time for a redraw, as in 3 seconds longer until I get new cards, which is really... I can't afford that, so I just go with the second option to lose half of my gold instead. I place a Moth Conjurer on the right side, hoping that it will stave off the enemies for just long enough. I also got a library card from this, which is fantastic, because now instead of redrawing 5 cards, I will redraw 6 cards every time I get a redraw. I'm just trying to rebuild everything while they are attacking the right wall, which is just about possible thanks to the Moth Conjurer probably keeping them at bay for a little while longer. Keep in mind, I pulled all of my army from the left side to, from the right side to the left. So they are not here, nobody is here. And these fishy guys also have the annoying tendency to throw little crabs behind the walls on top of whatever they are doing. And these little crabs stack up quickly. Like, there's also a lot. Here I also curse them, and thanks to having the flowers, they just take occasional damage, which is helpful. Finally, my army arrives from the left side, and we will be able to deal with these fish guys still, but whenever a wall goes down, your minions are in grave danger. These guys have a ton of HP, like they survive a tremendous amount. But thanks to everybody being just about here, and pulling my army back over to the left, just desperately trying to keep up, well, we might survive. Alrighty, here I think I just remove another card, because I really need to have less cards total, so I get the important ones at any given point. So, by the way, about the Prey card that I have right here. The Prey card allows me to, over time, upgrade cards. Once the card at the top, the blue circle, has run its course, a random card in my deck is upgraded, which is really nice. In this case, the Reaper just got upgraded. In the bottom left you can see that. And here we have the big fishy guys. The Prey card normally is really difficult to use because it takes both a long time. The duration, by the way, is reduced by each soul you collect. So if a lot of minions on your side or enemies die, it goes much more quickly. But because it ties up 6 population space normally, it is really difficult to use generally. But in this case, we're quite fine, thanks to having a massive amount of minion space available at this point. So I can just keep using the Prey card and effectively upgrade my entire deck here. So yeah. So far, so good. We are surviving, but there's going to be a mini-boss coming up on the right side. I just choose money, because I need the money. And at this point, I also try to basically expand all the way to the outsides, to the maximum reach, so I have as much time as possible to be able to, you know, reposition my minions and deal with the enemies that are coming, since dealing with anything right now is difficult, because I'm still hoping for one card that will kind of solve a lot of the problems and issues I'm facing. And this is also when I start realizing, wait a second, I have a lot of minions that I could place, so I should just start placing them. But also, there's a Necromancer. This is the card I was hoping for. A Necromancer summons 2 skeleton rats in front of it. They are a frontline unit, so you need to have a critical mass of Necromancers in order for the scale rats to always take the brunt of the damage without them getting destroyed quick enough. So, however, the scale rats, they die after a certain amount of time, right? And that's kind of a good thing, because your units dying, including the scale rats that are getting revived by the Necromancers, and they will give you extra souls for the soul siphon effect on your cards too. Alrighty, here we have one boss. This boss here likes to put your minions to sleep, and the egg finally has hatched. We get a D-Rex. the big Duck Duck Goose Rex. This thing is exceptionally powerful, 100 attack, 1000 HP, and it is just in time for the boss here, honestly. Because without it, I'm pretty sure this would not have succeeded. Now, the big risk is, by the way, I can use my leader ability, which can randomly remove any minion. It could also remove the goose, but maybe it is worthwhile to use here anyways. Either way, as you can see, this Necromancer is summoning just Skeletons. It takes a while for it to resummon a new one, which is why you want to have like 10, 15, 20 Necromancers at a time, just so they have a steady stream of Skeletons that both also deal a little bit of damage, which is nice, but most importantly, they just absorb all the damage the enemies throw at them. Here, the Goose is really just surviving and keeping the big boss at bay. It is amazing. I'm trying to pull it back to try and potentially heal it later, but it decides to keep attacking the little shell crabs that are getting flung at us and eventually goes down. Thank you for your services, D-Rex. You were absolutely incredibly valuable. Here I also get lucky that the enemies come from the right side, because if they came from the left, I'm not sure I could have been able to deal with them here. The boss finally goes down, and now we can confuse all enemies again, thanks to the Moth Conjurer, just conjuring moths, and the enemies, they deal a lot of damage, including to their own allies, if they're confused. Which is why the Moth Conjurer is so incredibly valuable, no matter at which point in the game you're getting it. So here, I think I choose the leader, not because I need the leader, but because I just don't need anything. Also here, I can transform one card into a shrine card. The shrine card is a large building, occupying 4 spaces. You only have 8 spaces between walls, by the way. And I can transform one card into a shrine. So initially, my reaction was, I'm just going to turn the flower into a shrine and just place the shrine, and that way it's kind of a roundabout way of removing a card, rather than me actually wanting to use the shrine. However, that shrine ended up being exceptionally instrumental in order to be able to survive too, which I wouldn't realize until a little bit later. So what it does is, it's a soul collecting building, which means it accumulates charges every time any unit dies, kind of like all souls things do. And in this case, the handy thing about the shrine is, whenever it is fully charged, I can activate it, and for 5 seconds, all my minions are immune to damage. So this will allow me to just have more survivability for my minions. The Skeletons that have curse also temporarily don't take damage from the curse, which is also going to be quite helpful. So yeah, initially I was just using this to get rid of a card in my hand, but as you probably can already tell without even necessarily knowing the game, this is incredibly powerful if used well. Here also normally I choose the flood for the flood cards, but I need both the money and I need to redraw the correct cards right now. I also finally get a church, or cleric thingy, monastery it's called, which allows me to periodically remove cards from my deck, which is going to be extremely helpful. Alrighty, also upgrade my last card, because everything else at this point has been upgraded thanks to the prey cards, and the shrine has been activated. I could activate it as soon as I click on it. The Necromancers on this side are going to be just barely surviving. Also here I decided to sacrifice one of the skeleton rats for it to add damage. But here I finally actually activate the shrine. So all my minions have a shield. They take no damage for 5 seconds. And 5 seconds is an eternity in order to just deal just about enough damage. I also keep playing the prey card, not realizing that my entire deck is now upgraded. And we have successfully stemmed the waves on the right side. We have recovered from the boss wave. The left side is surviving thanks to the Moth Conjurers. Well, for the most part anyways. I keep also playing these reinforced cards, so the walls are getting a little bit stronger each time. And, well, these minions here are just about good enough to deal with the remaining, like, big minion here. This guy is quite beefy, But because he only attacks the wall for the most part, eventually it's gonna go down. There it goes. So, I can finally remove more cards. More cards I don't need are the slums. I don't plan on putting more down, even though they are kind of helpful, to say the least, to expand your population space. Well, I have enough population space. I just need to draw the correct cards. So getting rid of it is the correct choice here. Finally rebuilding the wall. And there's another boss wave coming from the right side immediately. More necromancers. We have 6 necromancers at this point on this wall. So there is a decent stream of skeleton rats that are just kind of keep coming. And also, this gives me a target for my offering. Every time I offer one of these minions with that card, it adds +5 attack damage to all my minions. And if you have a lot of minions there, even if they don't deal initially much damage, it's a lot in the long run. More defensive walls, so I can expand the wall and have a bit more time to prepare. And that one moth conjurer is just occupying the entire army on the right side. It is really fascinating to me on how much it does. By the way, these enemies spawning little crabs that they throw behind the walls are actually surprisingly helpful, because the little crabs keep dying too, and I'll add more souls to all my things. I activate the shrine again, so my minions don't take the initial damage from the entire mass of enemies. Sacrifice a little scale rat, so my minions deal more damage, and you can see the souls just shooting up. I can just now reactivate the 5-second shrine so frequently, thanks to the little crabs dying all the time. It's fantastic. This is also where the church, the monastery, excuse me, is complete. I don't need to upgrade any more cards, so I remove the prey card at this point. And here I'm strongly considering just playing my Soul Reaper, because I kind of really don't want my Necromancers to go down, but I'm too late. My Necromancers are all dead at this point. So much for the critical mass of Necromancers, but it was just about enough to deal with the enemies at this point. Okay. There's one more skeleton rat that somehow survived in the front. I'm not entirely sure how that one was alive for that long. That's okay though, because we managed to stem the tides again. Here, I think I go for another temple card, if I'm not mistaken. I do, just so I can reactivate the shrine more frequently. And this is also where I finally get a second Necromancer card, because I have all the population space I, well, can possibly place, but I don't have the minions to be able to place, because I don't redraw my cards particularly quickly. Also here I just place the temple wherever I can. Now we have +4 souls every time any minion dies. And I just place all the minions here, because I start to realize that normally I want to have a massive amount of Necromancers, and they occupy 2 minion spaces each that you place. However, I have so much population space that I will not be able to fill them all out to the end of the game, so I just start placing all the minions instead of the individual ones. This is also where I can upgrade my second Necromancer finally, so they're going to summon up to, I think, 3 Skelratrons at a time, 2 or 3. Either way, it's more than before. And this is where the big wave of enemies arrive. Sacrifice a minion, sorry little guy, I can't target the Skell Rats, and making my minions invulnerable here for just a little while longer. The Soul Reaper also is absorbing more and more souls. It gains +2 attack per soul absorbed. It is at 782 at this point. So it is effectively would deal a ton of damage if it doesn't instantly die. But now I can make stuff invulnerable, remember? So here, this event here makes my leader ability cooldown have 60 seconds longer until I can activate it again, but I get +2 card draws every time I redraw my cards, which is quite amazing. The enemies are coming all from the left side, so I decide to pull my army to the left. Normally, you actually don't want the Necromancers to move, because while they're moving, they're actually not resummoning the little minions, meaning you don't get a steady income of souls that are getting flooded into your area. But because most of them died anyways, I figured it was okay to just pull my entire army to the left, since, well, I kind of need the space. Wait, I didn't pull it to the left? I guess I just considered it. I'm just as surprised as you might be. And I've been talking this entire time, but we just need to place more and more minions to try and survive, really. So this is where even the early game minions, while I didn't plan on keeping them, usually I try to remove them sooner rather than later. They are still helpful, so I don't want to remove them. They still, well, help. The pottery cart actually brought in a decent amount of money over time, but now that we have a steady income of souls, the forbidden trade is just getting charged up super quickly, and we keep getting a ton of money from it. Thanks to having a lot more card draw right now, I can just keep placing the minions, all of them, and eventually use the offering, just assassinate the random enemy, I guess, in order to increase the damage of the minions too. And these guys on the left side are just fighting each other still, which is fantastic, because they deal so much damage to each other too. So here we are, actually surprisingly surviving. And at this point, I actually finally started to realize that I might be able to do this, because it has been a struggle. It always is. Because the enemies are relentless, there's more enemies, there's double bosses, and unless you have specific cards, you won't be able to deal with them in time. But I have all the cards I need, and while I would like to have a direct damage card rather than Soul Reaper for the final boss, I think this might just be okay still. Placing more and more minions, and at this point money is pretty much a no issue anymore, thanks to the forbidden trade just collecting souls and also dealing extra damage to enemies. Wait, no, it doesn't deal damage. Collecting extra gold per enemy killed or, well, ally died. Once again, we have a lot of necromancers now. The skell rats from the necromancers keep dying, and they also generate souls, so everything just kind of goes to the same soul siphon bin, if you will. Doing post-commentary is difficult. I hope this has been at least somewhat okay. Somewhat alright. I would appreciate some more feedback if you managed to get this far in the video, although I would be surprised if many people managed to do that. But simultaneously, I do appreciate you who managed to get this far. Thank you very much. More confusion for the enemies, and again, these little crabs technically useful because they keep fueling my soul siphon cards and buildings. It's really fascinating because the little crabs technically play against the enemies, even though they are a huge nuisance normally, because they get to throw the crabs behind the walls to attack your ranged minions. But as you can see, my shrine is just replenishing super quick. You might have just noticed a card going off there, or an effect. I picked up a card that I forget its name of, that effectively just deals a ton of damage. And it's called the Oracle. In the top right you can see it. Effectively, this card takes 15 seconds to activate, and any soul collected during those 15 seconds will deal 2 damage to an enemy. And we're gathering a ton of souls very, very quickly. So effectively, normally the Oracle is difficult to use. Also, thank you Banshee for your service. We need more, like, direct damage minions at this point. Normally the Oracle is difficult to use because it also occupies 3 minion spaces. But we are on the final wave. We need to try and get as much damage as we can. And... what? I was really confused as to what is getting attacked here. Something getting attacked, which, well, it will show up a little bit later as to what it was, but I forgot about a certain mechanic coming up. Either way, this is kind of where stuff gets really curious. I was considering the Cannibal card briefly, because you can remove an allied unit, including the Skeletrons, and they will effectively increase the maximum HP of your allies on that wall by quite a bit. Here, we are getting really close to the end, and I'm just trying to amass, like, minions against the big boss on the left. So, of course, the small minions come in first, and conveniently, The oracles are going off, they are just dealing a ton of damage to the enemies, and also I forgot that I could upgrade them at this point, but that's okay. But the little minions are basically easily dealt with. The big bosses, on the other hand, these are going to be an issue. So this Kraken has a sucking mechanic where if I play any card right now while it is sucking in air, it will remove that card until you defeat the Kraken. Also, I make my minions invulnerable and play the Soul Reaper card, which instantly get killed before it gets an attack off. He didn't get the invulnerability, Yaga. No. I need to play the card before I activate the invulnerability from the Soul Reaper. This is a problem, because now I don't have, you know, the thing that would allow me to somehow survive here, because it would actually deal a ton of damage. Also, another mechanic that is about to come up here is where I was really confused as to, wait, why am I suddenly hearing attacking noises? And you'll see that in a second. But I still need to be able to deal with the big bosses here. Somehow. And the little minions, they are okay at this. Like, they're dealing decent damage, but they're not gonna survive for long against the bosses. They put them to sleep with their, like, mist. I can't play cards during the animation where it sucks, otherwise I'll lose the cards. I play the Oracle again for occasional more minions, but well, this might just work because, as you can see, we deal good damage. And we are still holding on for now. But nobody can move or attack while they are being put to sleep. Thankfully, these weird archers on the right side are... Oh yeah, they're just arriving on the right side. And they are just outside the reach on where they can get hit right now. Periodically activate the invulnerability, and it might be that my necromancer mass is large enough at this point. And here is finally where I hear, what are those attacking noises? And these guys here are really mean, because you have occasionally like minions or random radisons walking around. They don't normally do anything, like they can technically die, but they just respawn again. But there's a weird mechanic where they can get infected by enemies, and if they destroy buildings like houses or slums, they can generate more of those. And suddenly I was facing something behind the walls where I didn't even notice them being. But thankfully the minions that came from the right actually managed to deal with them just in time. Now I just needed to somehow pull back my army. And pulling back your army from the front wall is a big problem, because during that time they are just gonna get slaughtered by the enemies and bosses without them being able to retaliate or summon skull rats like the necromancers normally should do. But now they're put to sleep. Now they take a ton of damage, and a lot of them are gonna die. I placed my Soul Reaper again, this time being smart to use the shrine afterwards. And we just about managed to finish off the big crab that puts everything to sleep. Now it's just the octopus, but the Soul Reaper is just chunking this guy. Even without having the massive amount of stacks, we win. Oh boy. This did not look like a victory halfway through. So this was unexpected. Unexpected to win, because it just felt like a struggle. Wow. More or less the entire game through. It just felt like I was not gonna win this for the most part, despite getting all the cards I needed. And this is kind of what the highest difficulty is about. You're pretty much required to have a Moth Conjurer to be able to deal with enemies that are just way too tanky for your regular minions. Alrighty, the MVPs of this game were the Executioner, which allowed me to get more minion space by just sacrificing old minions, even the rat skeletons. This Centurion card, I didn't think the +1/+8 damage would be all that important, but every single minion that I spammed in the end to just kind of get to the minion count just kind of got +1 damage. Even the ghosts that don't normally deal any direct damage just kind of got that +1 too, which added up in the end quite a bit. Then the Oracle was pretty decent, but not really good against bosses. I was kind of entirely banking on the Soul Reaper just nuking the boss, but I forgot I need to place the Soul Reaper and then make it invulnerable. So my previous Soul Reaper just kind of got annihilated instantly. And also, that shrine building to grant allies invulnerability, initially I only picked it up because it was a weird way to remove a card, so I have less cards in my hand. But it ended up being exceptionally helpful for so many waves where otherwise I would have lost more minions. And getting 2 Necromancers to be able to amass them was really great too. So yeah, and the undisputed champion to just keep us alive regardless of how strong the enemies are, because the little moths get to fight make the enemies fight each other. The Moth Conjurer. I do think the Moth Conjurer is almost required to be able to get to the later waves. The Necromancer certainly helps a lot, but it's not as required, but having them summon massive amounts of Skelratrons, or Skelratons as they are called, is fantastic. But yeah, that worked out. So yeah, this was that. I hope this post-commentary was at least somewhat interesting, insightful, helpful, and if you liked it and somehow made it this far into the video, I hope you have the most pleasant day, I hope you're doing well, and thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to do the YouTube things like the thumbs up and stuff, I would not be unhappy either, or just let me know, maybe some feedback, what could I do better? I would appreciate it. Thank you so much.